Before I start, please do not skip towards the end to see the finalized tier list. There's a lot of context behind why each class passive is where they're at, and won't make any sense without understanding a few things. Firstly, this tier list assumes that a specific legendary necklace line is best in slot for almost all characters. The line that saps 5% max HP for 30% advanced skill damage is, in my opinion, the best necklace by far, and I'll talk more about that later in the video. Secondly, the following tier list placements for each character is based on the average run of any dungeon. After 140 hours of playtime since early access, I can see which passives will benefit most players and characters. Some placements can change if you run a premade, and with that, let us quickly dive into the first tier, which is the co-op quest. I will cover the boss raid tier list afterwards. So starting from the bottom, we have the F category. We have Lisbeth, Agil, Heathcliff, Alice, Shinon, Oberon, Silica, Yui, and Yuna. These are passives that you should never use because they'll almost never affect your damage in a meaningful way, and survivability is never an issue, so as long as you have accessories that are close to your maximum player rank. A reminder that every class is a damage dealer in this game, even support and tank classes. I won't even bother listing what each of them does, just not worth the increase in video length. Now for the C category, we have Credo, Asuna, Fukazira, and Administrator. First couple days, I put Admin near the top because the ability to gamba for stats in a round seemed fun and strong. However, after seeing how awful the stats are, it's almost never worth the gamble. Fuka, on the other hand, can be higher than C. However, most players play female classes, limiting the total attack power you can give to the team. You should only be using Fuka's passive if everyone in your party is playing a male character to take advantage of a 6% attack increase given to each party member. Finally, Credo and Asuna's passive is too hard for almost all classes to take advantage of, just because of how much downtime there is in co-op quests. It's very hard to maintain a 20+ combo in this game mode. They are more suited for boss raids. The B category in co-op quests are for passives that are strong, but require a lot of setup and is somewhat hard to control. Here we have Sturbin and Yuki's passive. Sturbin gives 30% more crit rate when an enemy is CC'd or unable to fight back, such as like frozen, stunned, or downed. Not all the time will the enemy be CC'd, as most skills that inflict CC are based on a low % chance. Also, the bosses in co-op may skip most of the down phases from the chain finish due to the damage being too high. Sturbin's passive is more preferred in boss raids, which I will mention later in that section. Yuki's passive gives a 20% attack increase below 50% and goes up to 40% attack increase when below 25% HP. This has high uptime when paired with the necklace I mentioned earlier that saps 5% of your max HP. However, it is hard to keep your HP low. A teammate can accidentally heal you, or you may run into the many health orbs on the ground in co-op quests. There are better choices of passives that give you more autonomy over your uptime. For the A category, we have EG and Yu-Gi-Oh! EG gives 10% increased crit rate whenever you're attacking elites or named enemies. This gives it a strong footing as it has 100% uptime on those specific enemy types. However, the trade-off is that the bonus is pretty low compared to the other options for co-op quests. The low crit rate bonus is why it is placed in the A category. EG is a much better suited option for boss raids. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is strong as it gives an 8% chance of freezing any elite or below using advanced skills. I generally see a few running this as it drastically reduces the risk of anyone taking too much damage. However, I don't believe it's worth giving up a whole passive slot for. The reason for this is that there are a few classes that already have CC pre-built into their class. Also, it's much better to use a special effect line on an accessory to apply stun CC, so you lose less damage that way. You're losing around a 5% attack line, giving up a special line effect, versus 25+% attack, giving up a passive effect. S tier, I decided to split it into two categories, one for range and the other for melee. Lin is a strong S tier range passive when it comes to co-op quests. She's a bit better than EG simply because there's more normal type enemies you face in these co-op quests. Also, she has a higher crit rate value than EG at 12% max at close range. It isn't that tough to be close to elites or named enemies in co-op quests versus the bosses in boss raid, so the passive uptime is very high and that's why it deserves its S tier spot. For melee S tier, we have Argo and Leafa. Argo's passive gives a 30% damage increase to any enemy hit in the back. Note that Argo's is the only passive that gives a flat damage increase and not an attack stat increase. Enemies are fairly easy to back attack in co-op. The small enemies that are hard to back attack usually don't matter much since you'll likely one-shot them anyway. Even if your uptime isn't near high on the passive, you're getting much more value out of it than most passive below the S tier. The other S tier is Leafa, where she gives a 25% attack increase to attack stat land while you are off the ground. Many classes may feel weird at first jumping all the time, but trust that you'll deal more damage on average after getting the hang of it with your class. Some classes even deal increased damage with airborne basic attacks, making them ideal to take advantage of Leafa's passive. It's good to build Leafa's character rank to 30 early since she doesn't deal a whole lot of damage in co-op quests or boss raids. Realistically, if you dealt high damage as Leafa, you would probably deal like 2 or 3 times that amount with a much stronger character. She's also a good beginner friendly class since her skills are very easy to use. Beyond the S tier category lies probably the strongest passive in co-op out of everyone, and any class can use it effectively except for maybe Shinon and Sturban. Klein's passive gives a 30% attack boost for 10 seconds whenever your HP drops. This is practically 100% uptime when you have the necklace I mentioned earlier in the video that saps 5% of your max HP. If you are struggling to survive, try to have accessories around your player rank or pair the necklace up with the bracelet that gives lifesteal on melee hit. If you don't have the necklace for your class yet, Klein's passive would hover around the A or B tier category. And that wraps up the co-op quest tier list. Now let's move on to the boss raid passives. These are a bit more different than co-op quests, and some passives are moved several tiers. The F tier category stays the same however. Never use these 9 passives under any circumstance. For the C tier category, we have Fukazira, Administrator, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Argo. Fuka's and Admin's reasons hasn't changed since co-op quest and therefore they'll stay at C tier. Yu-Gi-Oh's moved to C tier since there's almost never a time you need to freeze elites or below. They die too fast in this game mode and sometimes they can even be skipped entirely if everyone deals enough damage. More on that strat at the end of this tier list. Finally, we have Argo, and we have him down here at C now because all bosses are impossible to near impossible to back attack consistently. There are better passives that have higher uptime in boss raids. In the B tier category, we have Yuki, Kirito, Asuna, and Lin. The B tier category can be considered S tier for select classes in boss raids. Yuki's reason for B tier stays the same. However, with Kirito and Asuna's, they give a bonus whenever you are 20 combo. Kirito gives a 20% attack bonus while Asuna gives a 15% crit rate. The buffs are lost immediately upon losing combo, so it's hard to maintain outside of fast melee classes like EG. If maintained, these are very strong passives that have high uptime in boss raids. Finally, we have Lin. Lin's passive works really well for range classes that stay close range to the boss like Fuka and Lin herself. The passive can even work well with Shinon and Sturban if you can handle playing close to the boss. Remember that this passive only works on range, so not many classes can use Lin. I decided to skip the A tier category because I don't think any of the passives really fit that category, so we'll just move on to S tier. For the S tier category, we have Leafa and EG. These passives can be used on practically any class and are designed to have good uptime on the boss. I was even using Leafa's passive on the sniper classes like Sturban, and it was doing really well. Just got to get used to jump casting everything, pretty much. Above S tier, we have 2 that should be used in any boss raid, which are Klein and Sturban's passive. Klein's should only be used though if you have the necklace that saps your HP. Sturban, on the other hand, it's hands down the strongest passive next to Klein's. Sturban gives a 30% crit rate increase to bosses that are down. At first, you may think that it won't have a lot of uptime like EG or Leafa's. However, the value you get from the crit rate far exceeds that of EG or the diminishing returns that you would get from stacking both Leafa and Klein's passives since they're both attack passives. Sturban's passives helps both casual and hardcore in boss raids. Most players can only deal most of their damage during down phases, so Sturban helps the most in that regard. Also, this helps hardcores that are trying to skip phases. In boss raids, you can skip the second wave of enemies in any boss raid if everyone's damage is high enough to push beyond the second and third HP bar when the boss is down from the chain finish mechanic. If you aren't aware, the chain starts at a certain HP threshold. This is where damage starts to really matter and where most of it will come from the boss being in the down state. Running Sturban's passive will boost your odds of skipping second wave of enemies. In all the runs I've had that skipped second wave, they all saved about like 1 full minute on average, which is huge when you're going to be farming these boss raids like hundreds or even thousands of times over. And with that, this has been the co-op quest and boss raid tier list. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below or talk to me about it on my Twitch. Be sure to like and sub since I'll help my small channel out. Thank you so much for listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.